Imagine this. You wake up one morning, the sunlight streaming through your window, and for a moment, everything feels normal. You go about your routine, brushing your teeth, making coffee, scrolling through your phone. But then, as you sit down to plan your day, a strange thought creeps in. It's not a new thought, but one you've pushed aside countless times before. It whispers, "Why do I keep making the same mistakes?" You pause. The coffee cup hovers midair. You think about the job you didn't apply for, the relationship you sabotaged, the dream you abandoned. You remember the moments when you acted in ways that didn't align with who you thought you were, snapping at a loved one, procrastinating on a project you cared about, or staying silent when you should have spoken up. And now, the question grows louder. Why do I keep doing this to myself? This isn't just about bad habits or poor decisions. It's deeper than that. It's about the parts of yourself you don't fully understand, the impulses, fears, and desires that seem to come from somewhere outside your control. It's about the shadow that follows you, unseen but always present, shaping your choices in ways you can't quite grasp. Here's the paradox. You believe you're in control of your life. You make plans, set goals, and tell yourself you're the author of your own story. But what if you're not? What if, beneath the surface of your conscious mind, there's a hidden force, a shadow, that's pulling the strings? Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, called this the shadow self, the part of your psyche that houses everything you've repressed, denied, or ignored. It's the repository of your darkest emotions, your unacknowledged desires, and your deepest fears. And here's the unsettling truth. Your shadow isn't just a passive observer. It's active. It influences your decisions, your relationships, and your sense of self. It's the reason you sometimes act in ways that surprise even you. Think about it. Have you ever lashed out at someone and later wondered, where did that come from? Have you ever felt inexplicably drawn to a person or situation that you knew wasn't good for you? Have you ever sabotaged your own success just when you were on the brink of achieving something meaningful? These aren't random occurrences. They're the work of your shadow, quietly steering your life in directions you didn't consciously choose. But why? Why would a part of you, your own mind, work against your best interests? Why would it hide in the darkness, only to emerge at the worst possible moments? And most importantly, how can you stop it from controlling your decisions? The answers lie in understanding the shadow, not as an enemy, but as a misunderstood aspect of yourself. It's not evil, but it is powerful. It's not separate from you, but it is hidden. And until you bring it into the light, it will continue to shape your life in ways you can't predict or control. So, let's ask the great question. What if the key to understanding yourself and reclaiming control of your life lies in confronting the very thing you've been avoiding? What if the shadow isn't something to fear, but something to embrace? This is where the journey begins. Not with easy answers or quick fixes, but with a deep, unsettling exploration of the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to face. It's a journey into the darkness, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because only when you understand your shadow can you truly understand yourself. And as you stand at the edge of this revelation, one thing becomes clear. The decisions you make today, the ones that feel so deliberate, so conscious, are not entirely your own. They're influenced by a force you can't see, but one you can no longer ignore. The question is, are you ready to meet your shadow? To understand why your shadow controls your decisions, you must first understand why it exists. This isn't just a quirk of human psychology. It's a survival mechanism, a byproduct of evolution, and a reflection of the human condition. The shadow isn't something you're born with. It's something you create. And it's created for a reason. From the moment you're born, you're taught what's acceptable and what's not. You learn to smile when you're happy, cry when you're sad, and suppress the emotions that don't fit the mold. Anger, jealousy, greed, fear. These are the emotions that get tucked away, hidden in the corners of your psyche. But they don't disappear. They fester, they grow, and over time, they form the shadow. Carl Jung believed that the shadow is born out of necessity. In his view, the psyche is a self-regulating system, constantly striving for balance. When you reject certain aspects of yourself, your so-called negative emotions or unacceptable desires, they don't vanish. Instead, they're relegated to the unconscious, where they take on a life of their own. The shadow, then, is the part of you that carries everything you've disowned. But why does this happen? Why do we reject parts of ourselves in the first place? The answer lies in the tension between individuality and conformity. As social creatures, we're wired to belong. We need the approval of others to survive, both physically and emotionally. But this need for approval comes at a cost. To fit in, we must suppress the parts of ourselves that threaten our place in the group. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this tension well. In his writings, he explored the concept of ressentiment, the repressed anger and envy that arise when individuals are forced to conform to societal norms. Nietzsche argued that modern society, with its emphasis on morality and order, stifles our natural instincts. We're taught to be good, to follow the rules, to suppress our darker impulses. But in doing so, we create a shadow that grows stronger with every repressed desire, every unspoken thought, every denied emotion. Arthur Schopenhauer took this idea even further. He believed that the human will, the driving force behind our actions, is inherently irrational. We're driven by desires we don't fully understand, and these desires often conflict with our conscious goals. The shadow, in this sense, is the manifestation of our unconscious will. It's the part of us that refuses to be tamed, that rebels against the constraints of society and reason. But the shadow isn't just a personal phenomenon, it's also a cultural one. Aldous Huxley, in his dystopian novel Brave New World, warned of a society that suppresses individuality in the name of stability. In such a world, the shadow becomes a collective force, a reservoir of repressed desires and unacknowledged truths. And when the shadow is ignored for too long, it erupts in the form of rebellion, violence, or self-destruction. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, offered a different perspective. He believed that the shadow is a product of bad faith, the act of lying to ourselves about who we are. According to Sartre, we're fundamentally free, but this freedom is terrifying. To avoid the responsibility of choice, we create a false self, a persona that conforms to societal expectations. The shadow, then, is the truth we're too afraid to face. So, what does this mean for you? It means that your shadow isn't just a collection of repressed emotions. It's a reflection of the choices you've made and the choices you've avoided. It's the part of you that remembers every time you silenced your anger, every time you denied your desire, every time you sacrificed your authenticity for the sake of approval. And it's the part of you that refuses to be forgotten. But here's the problem. The more you ignore your shadow, the more power it gains. Like a neglected child, it demands attention. It manifests in your relationships, your career, your health. It shows up in the form of self-sabotage, addiction, and inexplicable anger. It's the reason you keep making the same mistakes, even when you know better. And yet, most people never confront their shadow. They live in denial, convinced that they're in control of their lives. But the truth is, the shadow is always there, lurking beneath the surface, shaping your decisions in ways you can't see. So the question becomes, how do you break free? How do you reclaim control from a force you can't even see? The answer lies in understanding the shadow, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to show you the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to face. And only by facing these parts can you begin to integrate them, to bring them into the light. But this is no easy task. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths about yourself. It requires you to ask the hard questions. What am I hiding from myself? What have I been too afraid to admit? What parts of me have I disowned? And as you begin to answer these questions, you'll start to see the shadow for what it really is. Not a monster, but a mirror. a mirror that reflects the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to see. But this is just the beginning. The journey into the shadow is long and difficult, and it's not for the faint of heart. But it's also the only way to truly understand yourself and to reclaim control of your life. So, are you ready to take the next step? If the shadow is the hidden force shaping your decisions, then its consequences are the silent ripples that spread through every aspect of your life. These consequences aren't always obvious. They don't announce themselves with fanfare or drama. Instead, they seep into your relationships, your career, your health, and your sense of self in ways that are subtle but profound. Consider this. Have you ever found yourself in a relationship that felt inexplicably toxic, even though you couldn't pinpoint why? Or perhaps you've noticed a pattern of self-sabotage in your career, missing deadlines, procrastinating on important projects, or avoiding opportunities that could propel you forward. Maybe you've struggled with habits you can't seem to break, despite your best efforts. These aren't random occurrences. They're the fingerprints of your shadow, quietly influencing your behavior from the depths of your unconscious mind. The shadow doesn't just affect your actions, it shapes your perception of reality. Cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts that distort your thinking, are often fueled by the shadow. For example, confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms your existing beliefs, is often a way to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about yourself. Similarly, projection, the act of attributing your own repressed qualities to others, is a classic shadow mechanism. When you criticize someone for being too selfish or too controlling, you might be projecting the parts of yourself you've disowned. Neurologically, the shadow operates through the limbic system, the part of your brain responsible for emotions and memory. When you encounter a situation that triggers a repressed emotion, anger, fear, shame, your limbic system activates, bypassing your rational mind. This is why you sometimes react in ways that feel out of character. It's not that you're irrational, it's that your shadow is in control. Culturally, the shadow manifests in collective behaviors and societal norms. Think about the way modern society glorifies productivity while stigmatizing rest. This isn't just a cultural trend, it's a reflection of our collective shadow, the parts of ourselves we've disowned in pursuit of success. The same can be said for our obsession with appearance, our fear of vulnerability, and our tendency to numb ourselves with distractions. These aren't just individual struggles, they're symptoms of a society that refuses to confront its shadow. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of the shadow is its impact on your sense of identity. When you reject parts of yourself, you create a fragmented sense of self. You become a collection of masks, each one designed to hide a different aspect of your shadow. Over time, these masks become so ingrained that you forget who you really are. You lose touch with your authentic self, and in its place, you create a persona, a false self that's designed to please others but leaves you feeling empty inside. This fragmentation isn't just psychological, it's existential. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued that the search for meaning is the primary drive of human existence. But when you're disconnected from your shadow, you're also disconnected from your sense of meaning. You might achieve success, accumulate wealth, or gain recognition, but if you're living inauthentically, none of it will satisfy you. The shadow also affects your relationships. When you're disconnected from parts of yourself, you project those parts onto others. This creates a dynamic of attraction and repulsion. You're drawn to people who embody the qualities you've disowned, but you also resent them for it. This is why so many relationships are fraught with conflict and misunderstanding. It's not that you're incompatible, it's that you're projecting your shadow onto each other. And then there's the toll on your mental and physical health. Repressed emotions don't just disappear. They manifest as stress, anxiety, and even physical illness. Studies have shown that chronic stress, often caused by unresolved emotional conflicts, can lead to a host of health problems, from heart disease to autoimmune disorders. The shadow, in this sense, isn't just a psychological phenomenon, it's a physiological one. But here's the most unsettling part. The shadow thrives in the dark. The more you ignore it, the more power it gains. It feeds on your denial, your avoidance, your fear, and the longer you wait to confront it, the more damage it does. So, what's the solution? How do you break free from the shadow's grip? The first step is awareness. You must recognize the ways in which your shadow is influencing your life. This isn't easy. It requires brutal honesty and a willingness to face the uncomfortable truths about yourself. But it's also the only way to begin the process of integration. Integration doesn't mean embracing your shadow in its raw, unfiltered form. It means acknowledging it, understanding it, and finding healthy ways to express it. It means bringing the shadow into the light, not to destroy it, but to transform it. But this is just the beginning. The journey into the shadow is long and difficult, and it's not for the faint of heart. But it's also the only way to truly understand yourself and to reclaim control of your life. So are you ready to take the next step? Breaking free from the shadow's control isn't about defeating it. It's about understanding it. It's about recognizing that the shadow isn't an enemy to be vanquished, but a teacher to be listened to. This is where the rebellion begins, not with a battle, but with a dialogue. The first step in this rebellion is to stop running. For most of your life, you've been taught to avoid discomfort, to suppress your negative emotions, and to present a polished version of yourself to the world. But what if the very things you've been avoiding hold the key to your liberation? What if your anger, your fear, your jealousy, and your shame are not obstacles, but gateways? Carl Jung called this process shadow work, the act of confronting and integrating the disowned parts of yourself. It's not about indulging in your darkest impulses, but about acknowledging them. It's about saying, "This too is me," and allowing yourself to feel what you've been too afraid to feel. Start by paying attention to your triggers. What situations, people, or emotions make you react in ways that feel disproportionate or out of character? These are clues to your shadow. For example, if you find yourself irrationally angry at someone who seems overly confident, it might be because you've repressed your own desire for confidence. If you feel a pang of jealousy when a friend succeeds, it might be because you've denied your own ambition. Once you've identified a trigger, sit with it. Don't judge it, rationalize it, or push it away. Simply observe it. Ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What part of myself have I been ignoring? This is where the real work begins. Journaling can be a powerful tool for shadow work. Write down your thoughts and feelings without censorship. Let the words flow, even if they're messy or uncomfortable. The goal isn't to create a masterpiece, it's to uncover the truth. Over time, patterns will emerge, recurring themes, hidden desires, buried fears. These are the threads that lead to your shadow. Another powerful technique is active imagination, a method developed by Jung. This involves engaging with your shadow in a conscious, creative way. Imagine your shadow as a person. What do they look like? How do they speak? What do they want? Have a conversation with them. Ask them questions. Listen to their answers. This might sound strange, but it's a way of giving your shadow a voice, of bringing it into the light. But shadow work isn't just an internal process. It's also relational. The people who trigger you the most are often mirrors of your shadow. Instead of blaming them or pushing them away, ask yourself, what can this person teach me about myself? This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or staying in toxic relationships. It means using your interactions as opportunities for self-discovery. Breaking free from the shadow also requires a shift in mindset. You must move from a place of fear to a place of curiosity. Instead of seeing your shadow as a threat, see it as an ally. It's not here to destroy you, it's here to help you grow. Every emotion, every impulse, every dark thought is a piece of the puzzle. And when you start to put the pieces together, you'll begin to see the bigger picture. This process isn't easy. It requires courage, patience, and a willingness to face the unknown. But the rewards are profound. As you integrate your shadow, you'll notice a shift in your relationships, your career, and your sense of self. You'll feel more whole, more authentic, more alive. And yet, this is only the beginning. The shadow isn't something you conquer once and for all. It's something you engage with continuously. It's a lifelong journey, not a destination. So, are you ready to take the next step? Here is the ultimate truth. Your shadow is not separate from you. It is you. It is not a monster lurking in the depths of your psyche. It is the part of you that has been silenced, ignored, and disowned. It is the part of you that holds your deepest fears, your wildest desires, and your untapped potential. And until you embrace it, you will never be whole. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. It means taking full responsibility for your life, not just the parts you're proud of, but the parts you've been too ashamed to acknowledge. It means admitting that your anger, your jealousy, your greed, and your fear are not flaws to be eradicated, but aspects of your humanity to be understood. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the essence of the shadow's power. When you ignore it, it controls you. But when you confront it, you reclaim your power. You become the author of your own story, rather than a character in someone else's. The journey into the shadow is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. It's about shedding the masks you've worn to please others and embracing the messy, complicated, beautiful truth of who you are. It's about recognizing that your darkness is not the opposite of your light, but its complement. Without the shadow, there can be no depth, no contrast, no growth. This is the paradox of the shadow. It is both your greatest challenge and your greatest gift. It is the source of your pain, but also the source of your power. It is the part of you that has been wounded, but also the part of you that can heal. And here's the most profound truth of all. The shadow is not unique to you. It is a universal human experience. Every person you meet, every friend, every enemy, every stranger, has a shadow of their own. And when you confront your shadow, you not only heal yourself, you contribute to the healing of the world. Imagine a society where people no longer project their shadows onto each other, where conflicts are resolved through understanding rather than blame, where individuals are free to express their full humanity without fear of judgment or rejection. This is the world that becomes possible when we do the work of shadow integration. But this work is not easy. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to face the unknown. It requires you to let go of the illusion of control and embrace the uncertainty of growth. It requires you to trust that the darkness within you is not something to be feared, but something to be explored. And as you embark on this journey, remember this: you are not alone. Every great thinker, every spiritual teacher, every artist who has ever dared to explore the depths of the human psyche has walked this path. From Carl Jung to Friedrich Nietzsche, from Fyodor Dostoevsky to Gabor Mate, they have all confronted their shadows and emerged transformed. So, as you stand at the edge of this revelation, ask yourself, are you ready to meet your shadow? Are you ready to embrace the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to face? Are you ready to step into the light of your own truth? The choice is yours. The shadow is waiting.